Welcome to Quantum Leadership. I'm Dr. Stephen Sideroff, and today we will be talking with Barry Stamos. Barry is a three-time exited Silicon Valley founder, investor, and CEO of SUPERNOVA, a global network of more than 250 exited founders who invest in and support growth stage companies. Stamos has co-founded One Heart, a human accelerator that has guided more than 1,000 CEOs and leaders through transformational experiences, integrating ancient wisdom with modern leadership. He has served as an advisor with over 1,000 global and colossal biosciences. His work blends high-performance entrepreneurship with purpose-driven conscious leadership, the philosophical foundation of SUPERNOVA. Welcome, leaders, and those of you who want to become a leader in your own life. As the world becomes more complex and the velocity of change keeps increasing, true leadership requires resilience, presence, vision, a dynamic ability to adjust and change, and the self-awareness to create healthy environments and cultures for your constituency. I'm Dr. Stephen Sideroff, and this is Quantum Leadership Podcast, where we go beyond conventional wisdom to explore the powerful principles of the quantum effect, and that to maximize leadership's ability to connect mind, body, and organizational success. Barry, what a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And I'd like to begin by a question about your journey to leadership. I'd like you to share, what that journey was like and include any of the obstacles that you've encountered and how you've handled them.
I'm approaching 50. So I've had many lessons over many years, and I actually got to start my career in management consulting. I wanted to get a job more than anything coming out of school, pay off some of that college debt, and I not only landed a job, I landed a great one. I got to work for one of the kind of the big five, consulting firms at the time, accounting firms, Arthur Andersen, a spin out now, Accenture, and thought I thought I had made it, climbed the corporate ladder, was getting promoted, consistently every year, was convinced I was going to be a lifer, I was going to make partner and be there forever. And turned out a handful of partners weren't in integrity. You may or may not be familiar with the Enron scandal. And then, like a house of cards, the company collapsed. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. This is my reality. And so what at the time felt like the worst thing that could happen to me ended up becoming the best. It was like the gift, if you will, of coming to the realization that if these big companies are risky, why not do the startup thing? And that was actually my entry into getting into startups, which was, a bit of my path. Over the many years, I think I've learned that leadership is fellowship. It's togetherness. It's not something that one can do alone. And there's many lessons in all of that. What I'll share with you as highlights is I ended up starting my first company. We ended up becoming the first acquisition of a company called Responses. We actually invented the drip email kind of sequencing. So email automation, you can send an email, something like a response system. Someone responds to it, you send a different email. If they don't respond, you send a different message or no message at all. And so we were using kind of predictive modeling early on. Anyway, suffice to say that was successful. We had a IPO, a unicorn exit to Oracle. Larry Ellison was one of my early clients, and came into a windfall. So, I grew up very middle class, and suddenly now I'm a multimillionaire, and I've kind of made it, kind of the proverbial unicorn founder. And I felt empty, Stephen. I felt like I had, won the game of business and yet lost the game of life. I didn't understand why I felt, the way that I did, because this is what success was. Why was I not feeling, successful? And that led me, through a whole series of lessons and just like vulnerability and asking questions and learning from people and not believing I knew everything, and, surrendering a bit of ego so I could kind of, look into the shadows and find the light and find my path over time.
So that actually was part of my next question, which was what personal experiences led you to integrate inner work with entrepreneurship? So you're hinting at that in your comment of feeling empty was the motivation, the trigger. What was that journey like for you, Barry?
Yeah. Well, first I'll just say that, like, I didn't know that the integration was possible. I had been mentored by many other leaders who more or less kind of believed this ridiculous notion, which is that, it's just business, it's not personal, and treating it almost transactional. I remember, when I was working for a company, it was like you were a cog in the machine. It's like, almost slavery, a version of modern slavery. It's like, I hired you, I pay you, you're going to do what I say, you're going to say what I do. And that's the way that it is. And respect my authority, if you will. And turns out that there's a kind of a stick, and there's also a carrot, and over time that burns people out. It's not in the highest. And so I think having experienced many different forms of leadership and breakdowns and burnout over time, I started to kind of find myself in a place where I wasn't at my peak performance. I wasn't, feeling motivated. Like the money wasn't enough of a carrot by and of itself. I craved meaning. I craved, connection. I wanted to be part of something, greater than or bigger than myself, and, real vision, real mission. Yeah. And so, and sometimes you can find someone who shares a story or something that lights a spark in you that leads you, towards something that feels really, compelling. And in my experience, I've found that's the real work we get to do in the world. We can, play a game that we say is in the name of business, and that's important because that puts food on the table and provides us with something to do with our waking hours. Without the service side of it, I just never felt the real joy or fulfillment that now I know is possible when I'm able to kind of combine the two, right? Make business personal, know that they're not separate, in fact, fully integrated, so that I can create wholeness, and from that space, from that place, come into my work and pour my light and my love and, real integrity and intention in all that I do. And I certainly don't do that every day. I sway, I get lost, I get knocked down, I say and do things that I, in the moment, sometimes as a reaction or trigger, and I'm finding ways to recognize, to recalibrate. I'm constantly finding ways to regulate, if you will, my central nervous system, helping myself focus, be easier or more in flow. So I get to know how I'm impacting others and how they're impacting me. And hopefully we're doing greater work in the world as a result of that.
I appreciate not only the shift that you made, but right now how you're describing the impact of that shift, Barry, because a lot of people wonder why do the inner work? I'm trying to, grow my profits, let's say, but I'm hearing in your explanation right now how the shift, how the inner work actually impacts the outer work.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, so important for people to hear why it makes a difference in the outer world to do the inner work. And perhaps you can expand a little bit more on that, because I think that's really what people need to be hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, something that I've come to realize, and, when I work with, startup founders or, CEOs scaling companies, or even, Fortune 500 executives, it's like, it's almost like, oh, well, I do yoga. and yet they don't bring the yoga practice into the business. And so, but why would I even do that? And how do they correlate? Interestingly, like if you look at kind of Maslow's hierarchy, right? I mean, if you're if you're at war, or you're focused on just living out of your car, I mean, food, safety, security, these are basic needs, and it's very challenging to focus on kind of the higher levels, if you will, of Maslow's hierarchy. And so talking to somebody who's about to be on the streets, or a company that's running out of money and can't make payroll, what have you, it's a challenging time to bring up, hey, I think this would be a great time for you to maybe take a moment and breathe. Have maybe meditate, allow yourself to recalibrate. They're like, no way, Stephen, like this is, I have no time for this. And yet what I've seen consistently, via pattern recognition, over having worked with so many successful people and people that have come through major transformations, is that there's a direct correlation, right, to the health and well-being of the founder, the leadership team, the company culture, and the success of that organization. And in the game that we play in life, and relationships and business is largely relationships, it's about consciousness. It's about being self-aware. It's about being able to see beyond yourself and through the eyes of others, and understand what's working, what's not working, what do I get to change, so that you can have the ability to radically recalibrate in real time, and learn and grow and evolve. And to me, in school, it was about memorization and understanding how other people thought, and leveraging those mental models, to apply for standard exams. It's like, well, in the real world, in business, many times, especially with innovation, we're charting our own path. And especially now in the age of AI, it's like there are few rules. Like we're making them up as we go, and whatever was true yesterday may or may not be, limiting today. And so, I believe, wholeheartedly, that the future right now is being co-created by those who can step out of themselves, like from themselves, but out of themselves, and allow things to flow from, to, and through, the great work that we get to do. And that requires quantum leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you said that, because, one of the key things today is how fast things are speeding up, how fast things are changing, the complexity of the worlds we live in. And one of the things you indicated in your response there is a nimbleness that you develop, the ability to more quickly adapt to change, right?
Exactly.
And that's really at the heart of what's creating a lot of stress and overwhelm with leaders today. And not only that, but a rigidity that gets in the way of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, I look at these things, seem, perhaps to some, immaterial or less important, and yet, like, the power of presence, the greater power of clarity,
Right.
competence, conviction, right? I mean, having almost a tuning fork, so that you can, have that emotional intelligence and the empathy, and be able to really tune in, like you're tuning in a, radio station, or finding a frequency, with not only other human beings, and the greater awareness of, the spaces that we, that we're creating, that we're occupying. And it's so not trivial. And those that do wield that greater awareness, that greater presence, that energetic, connection to humans and technology, and all of the elements that are around us, are incredibly more resourceful. They are way more agile, and, to your point, like responsive, and that accelerates speed to value in the richness of relationships, in the ability to quickly test and iterate to find footing, I mean, in projects and work. I mean, it's remarkable how that becomes a superpower, right? A super
Yeah.
skill. And it's not just, I've learned over time, a mindset. It's connecting, the greatest distance one can go is the journey, the 18 inches from their mind into their heart as a start, right? To
Mhm.
really start to find that greater kind of alignment and operating system and how we work and live and play.
So, Barry, when you refer to the heart, tell me what you're referring to there, and what's the important aspects and characteristics of heart that combined with mind make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been, in a place and time in my life and work where I'm just working out of my mind, and that can be effective, right? I mean, I can get results that way, and I also can burn bridges. I can burn out. I mean, I can burn a lot of people in my wake, so to speak. And when I'm coming from heart, connected to mind, I'm showing up in an entirely different way of being. Yeah, I people can sense whether I'm speaking truth. People can sense whether I like or even love what I do. People, it turns out, want to do business with people that like or love what they do, right? I mean, you can tell when you go, to a restaurant and eat a meal that was made with love, right? When you find a product or experience a service that was created intentionally, deliberately with not just, with not just the intention of profit, with the intention of service and in perhaps even a higher purpose. And to me, that's what separates kind of the ordinary from the extraordinary. And so when I look at some of the most successful companies in the world, many of the leaders that make it, those that don't, we're certainly not always operating from heart. And if we're connected to our why, if we're clear on our purpose, if we're more intentional with kind of our thoughts, our words, our actions, beauty, beauty is created like nature. It kind of magically unfolds. And I found that, and this is kind of a hard truth to swallow. Anything that's not made with love doesn't last. It won't survive the test of time.
Mhm.
And, or if it does, it will really suffer and have a lot of challenges. And I think that's true not only with the businesses that I'm birthing or that I'm in service to, it's also true with my family and my kids. And it's just like, it's all around me that I can see, it comes from, I'm able to create from a greater place and space when I do it from love.
Yeah,
And an example of that, if I may, with One Heart,
sure.
which is an organization that I started with my best friend. We both have had successful exits. We were keen on starting a startup studio. We were going to birth 3 companies a year, put our money behind those companies, find a amazing CEO, co-founder, and then after a year, set them onward so we could keep doing that, and over time build dozens of companies that are doing well and doing good in the world. And what was fascinating is that was coming from a good place in heart, but at the start. But after we launched it, after about a year and a half, we realized that like this wasn't feeling true. This wasn't like our calling. This felt like it wasn't who we are. And we ended up getting really lost in that kind of inquiry, that discovery, not trying to control where this would go. And that created the space for the birth of what is now known to be One Heart, which is this human accelerator where we bring CEOs and filmmakers and the works, the world's some of the world's most powerful creators into into an experience where we're combining ancient and modern modalities, including plant-based medicines. And so like I would have never dreamed of One Heart being that when we started. And I find that in so many startups and so many companies, it's like if we're trying to control it too much, we're suffocating it versus allowing a greater variation or version of what's possible to be able to kind of birth into being.
That I love what you just said there. I was going to ask you, you started that with the intention, with really great intentions,
Yeah.
but then it seemed to not continue in the direction you had anticipated. And I think you just put your finger on what may have caused that, which was trying to have too much control. Would you agree?
No, definitely. And that shows up in lots of different forms. I mean, not just in business, also relationships, right? I mean, there's a reason why like the divorce rate is, getting higher than it's ever been. It's like,
Mhm.
who we're marrying today is not going to be the same person that we're, going to be
Mhm.
with 5, 10, 50 years from today. It's like, and if we allow one another to grow and evolve into whatever our highest expression is, and we're both kind of cultivating that, what's possible. I mean, trying to control nature,
Right, right.
that's
So, yeah, absolutely. And these
cartoon.
are, and you're touching into some of the aspects of quantum leadership that we've been talking about. And one specifically is the notion of coherence.
Yes.
And I find that when you come from the heart, and I like to say people either come from the heart or come from protecting their heart,
Mhm.
and which blocks the energy. And
Yes.
so when you come from the heart, you really invite this notion of coherence where people are more in alignment. And when they're more in alignment, you magnify the quantum effect, so to speak.
Yeah, no, so true. And the heart is miraculous in that. And first of all, let me just say, like, to your point about being closed, I mean, I've put on armor over the years. Like, many of us have. Something happened in our early childhood. We may or may not be aware of it. That forced us, or we chose to protect ourselves, right? So we're doing that out of concern for safety, right? We're doing that for maybe it's shame. I mean, there's lots of
Mhm.
reasons why we do those things. And when we can start to feel again. And this is important because when I was on my kind of trajectory, especially the kind of the shooting star in terms of success, I got to a place where I couldn't feel, Stephen. Like
Mm.
I could not feel. I was like Pink Floyd, song, like I was comfortably numb. I was
Right,
more machine than
right.
man. And so
Mhm.
just feeling again, and it's just that is a powerful thing. And when we feel, when we're in touch with our senses, we intuitively know, is this right for me? Is this good for me? Right? And when we have that kind of greater awareness, which I believe is coming mostly from the heart, then it's like, fuck yeah, I want to do business with you. Yeah, I want to be in relationship with you. Yeah, this is a heck yeah for me. I'm absolutely, feeling, you know, really good about making these decisions. Or it's just as powerful. It's a no, right? And it's just much clearer versus trying repeatedly to make something work with people and or places or things that just aren't right for us. And we weren't meant to be that. We are each one of us incredibly unique, gifted, special in some zone of genius or superpower. And it's like so many of us are trying to, be and do so many things when ultimately, the greatest thing I believe we can do for ourselves and one another is be ourselves, because that's uniquely special. And when we find that frequency, as you shared, and we're operating from that vibrational alignment,
Right.
everything comes so much more easily and naturally. And it still requires work. And that's the good work.
Right, right. And, another perspective or another way of saying that is I like to say that our brains are the most powerful AI devices in the universe, right? But when you don't pay attention to your feelings, when you've submerged them, you've pushed them down, essentially you're cutting off one half of your brain and trying to operate just out of the left side of your brain. So you have half of an AI device going. And when you bring in emotions, feelings, and you're tuned in on that level as well, now you integrate both sides of the brain. You have a complete AI device, and you're not operating with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah, yeah. I like to think of it differently, and yet there's some similarities. So I'm deeper in the AI space now. So I actually know that, like, AI has surpassed our brains today. I mean, it's already, I mean, our brains today for me are more of like a receiver, right? It's like, but AI already is capable of going way exponentially better, faster than our brains today, which makes our unique advantage today, or relevancy today, our ability to feel, our ability to experience, our ability to love, our ability to, you know, be in relationship. And to me, it's like right now, a lot of the people that I'm working with are really focused on leveraging AI for advantage, to rapidly accelerate growth at scale with very few resources, and the like. And I believe what we're going to find is that people that are more in touch with themselves, their emotions, their feelings, like, that one another in relationship, are actually going to have a much greater advantage. So actually, going back to one of your prior questions, which is like, how do you explain to somebody today why it's important to do the inner work, and to focus on, what would typically be a little softer skills, or things that tangentially don't seem as relevant to, the working world. It's like, actually, it's more important, it's more timely, it's more urgent than ever. Because, like we experienced during COVID, when that was kind of a wake up call for the world, a lot of the things that we've grown accustomed to are getting shaken up pretty fast. And AI is going to create a very interesting reality for all of us, and those of us that are able to be okay being uncomfortable, working through, standing in the eye of the storm, and being, and creating stillness, and finding, resolve, and being adaptive. All these things are principally important for thriving in the new age.
Right, right, right. You've said that founders who build enduring companies are the ones who've walked through the fire and come back as light.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So it's an initiation of sorts. Being a founder is something that, unless you've been a founder, few can understand or appreciate, right? I mean, there's people that have gone to war together. There's people that have traveled the moon together. There's, founders are a unique breed, and yet there's over 350 million entrepreneurs, in the world today, and it's growing rapidly thanks to AI. When there is no map, when everything is up to you, and you're going through it all, and there are mirrors all around you, and every decision you make is an immediate reflection on, it exposes all of you, right? I mean, not just, not just the business, you. I mean, if, how you treat people, I mean, there's so many things that it's an accelerator, it's a pressure cooker. And so, when I say, those that have walked through the fire, it's like, I think whether you are a founder, or you're experiencing that in relationship or travel, or wherever you're getting initiated, if you will, sickness, near-death experiences, plant medicines, the works, you're finding out who you really are, what you're made of, being truly tested. And it burns off anything it's not you, if you're doing it the way that ultimately will be in the highest of service. And those that have faced their fears, their greatest fears, like, come back lighter. And those that have really focused on the shadows, and gone to the deep kind of ends of darkness, come back as light, because they're able to speak openly and vulnerably about the breakdowns and the breakthroughs, and people resonate with that in ways that just cut through a lot of the noise that exists in the world today, because it's relatable. I mean, the most successful people I know are full of doubt are constantly criticizing themselves, and others. I mean, this, Jennifer Grace used to say, the itty bitty shitty committee, we all have it. It's like, that voice in our heads that's, saying you're not good enough, or, this won't work. And that's a form of self-sabotage. It's wonderful because it points out things that, like, you get to be aware of. And also too, coming into, another voice that says, you are good enough. There's nothing that you can do or say that would make me love you any more than I do today. It's like, it sounds silly. And yet, as an affirmation to, loved ones, or even yourself in mirror work, I mean, it's incredibly important, because I know billionaires that still are restless, don't sleep well, and they're denying themselves the one thing that only they can gift themselves, and that is self-love, Stephen.
Mhm.
And bosses and board members and kings and gods and people that don't believe in gods, and so it's a house of cards. It all breaks down if ultimately we don't allow ourselves to have the joy, capturing a little bit of joy, and allowing ourselves to experience peace and fulfillment, and the things that many of us wait until our dying years to start asking the questions and doing the work. And yet, if we do that work sooner, then there is a lightness that comes through, more waking moments where we get to experience a little bit more of the heaven on earth that does exist, if we choose to see it that way.
I love what you're saying. And one question that keeps coming up for me, Barry, is these founders who are working, 14-hour days, and they don't have time for anything other than what they're doing. And even after they move past that stage, there's so much going on, so much they need to be doing, that they don't find time even for personal time.
Yeah.
How do you get them to recognize, or to go into this inner process that you work with them on? Is it that it only happens when they are facing burnout? Or what's that process for you? And how do you get them to go for what you're offering?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't get anybody to do anything, because people won't do anything that they don't want to do. I mean, free will is like our birth ticket. It's like
Right,
we were born with it. It's like we
right.
get to independently choose, there's a choose your own adventure. I used to love the choose your own adventure books. Like, this is definitely a choose your own adventure game we play, this game of life. There are a number of kind of inflection points, or event triggers, if you will, that cause people to maybe open their aperture to asking for support or help, or calling in the cavalry, so to speak. And so it could be that they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. It could be that they've just failed enough times that they're frustrated with that and want a different route. There's so many different things that can cause, if you will, kind of a connection or an opening. And when there is that receptiveness, that vulnerability, that tenderness, where there's maybe a teachable moment, or an offering of guidance or mentorship, or perhaps it's an introduction or a connection to someone who has been there in their shoes, has been exactly where they stand today, and has found a way to, not only get through it, but, have a successful outcome on the other side. That is where we long for community, especially those of us that are working tirelessly and putting in the long hours. And it almost sounds like, I remember thinking this sounded like, like some self-help book or some, bullshit, but like, the founder that takes, a few days for themselves, and ends up going on a trip that they would normally not ever take, because they don't take any vacation, somehow miraculously finds inspiration in nature, and returns and creates like the world's leading product, or meets someone that introduces them to someone that is their next lead investor. It's like very strange how there's this symphony of synchronicities that the universe kind of has lined up for us, and we can choose a very challenging path, or we can choose a path of less resistance, right? It's amazing how that can impact us. And also, it's not always the big things. It's a lot of the little, micro moments or decisions in the day. The average person makes like over 4,000 decisions a day, the majority of them unconscious. It's like, no wonder why we're so exhausted when our heads hit the pillow every night. And we can program a lot of our day by rituals, by routines. So we can set ourselves up to be in a really good place and space for when those opportunities present themselves. We get to see the signs. We get to allow ourselves to be called into shortcuts, if you will, like faster routes to getting what we want, what others, want from us, and be contributing to something, greater than.
Yeah, these are all the conditions really that you're describing that set us up for the quantum effect, for benefiting from the quantum effect, bringing everything into coherence, in alignment. And that's when you get these really amazing kinds of results.
Yep, definitely.
What would you say are the qualities of founders that contribute to them becoming great leaders?
Yeah, it's a great question. Openness, a receptivity. I think for me, the greatest founders have, they kind of tap dance a little bit, if you will, Stephen, on being, visionaries, where they're like leaning into the future and they're creating a possibility, and they're fantastic storytellers or enrollers in the permutations of possibilities. And they're painting a picture of what they see in terms of something beautiful to, allow others to kind of see a little bit of that perspective or point of view. And yet they're also anchored enough where they're not just spinning something that doesn't exist today and that's out of integrity. It's like they're aware enough to be able to ground that in reality, where they have the ability to see things holistically and also yet understand the different parts that together create, the whole. I think of kind of sacred geometry a little bit when I'm imagining a little bit what I'm saying here, in terms of understanding that like they are someone who's like orchestrating, a symphony, where it's like they understand that there's all these different instruments and everyone's playing kind of a different one, if you will. And yet, they're orchestrating, each person but are part of something that's kind of moving through them, not something that they're controlling, if you will. And so anyway, that's a real abstract answer. If I got like more grounded, it's believing in yourself, but also, not being convinced that you even know what the fuck it is you're talking about, and kind of toggling between that, right, a little bit, and being really open to feedback and receptive to other ideas, and rapidly innovating and being willing to change, and just like a butterfly that's going to be a caterpillar that's going to metamorphosize, and then take flight. It's like surrendering, like trusting and yet surrendering that there's something greater at work and at play here, and making good choices and learning. Like accelerated learning is also really important, I believe, for the best founders and leaders today, because it's more dynamic than ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are a great list of qualities that you just discerned, Barry. A grounded visionary that takes leadership, but also is receptive to everything that's brought to him, is open. That's a great array of characteristics.
Yeah, I'd add, just because you gave me a moment too to reflect on what you shared, and also just to pause and center integrity, truth,
Right.
truth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, speaking your truth, standing
Mm-hmm.
for others' truths, deepening in the roots of values, respecting that there's wisdom. I'm amazed in the work that I've done with indigenous communities and tribes, of like the elders, and how much knowledge is there, and how much gets passed through generations, and yet how in modern culture and business, we just, throw away, people work for the company for X years and we throw them away. And there's like their knowledge, like all the tacit knowledge, all the stories, like gets lost. And maybe we have a board and maybe there's advisors. And yet like we have so much richness in the working world all around us. And it's like wielding that, good leaders, find ways to wield that wisdom, knowing that, and something I've learned, everyone's a teacher. I mean, I've learned just as powerful a lesson, Stephen, from, the $20,000 an hour, high priced, consultants and subject matter experts as I have from my Uber driver, from, the person serving me at the table at a restaurant, as somebody who's holding the door open for me. There's so much wisdom in the kindergarten teacher. It's like, wow.
Well, that's another expression of openness.
Yeah.
That openness means that, the information, the wisdom, awakening can come from any quarter, can come from any direction.
And it took me a long time to realize that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also appreciate you bringing in, and I said it when I read your bio, ancient wisdom, because we've lost a lot of that. My wife produces a film festival, the Garifuna International Indigenous Film Festival, and the purpose is to preserve indigenous cultures, but also their wisdom.
Oh yeah, no, it's so important, and yeah,
because we keep distilling as part of the scientific process to get the essence. But a lot of times we lose what happens in the whole picture when we try and go for the gem within the whole. We lose a bigger gem that is really part of what ancient wisdom and indigenous cultures have to offer us.
Absolutely. No, it's so true.
One of the things you've referred to as founders as architects of humanity's evolution. Can you explain what you're referring to there?
Yeah. So I'm referring to founders have disrupted and continue to disrupt trillion-dollar industries, right? They're inventing solutions to, the major problems of the world today. Many are creating products and services that the world doesn't need out of greed. And this is creating, if you will, the social constructs and, in many ways, a lot of what we experience in life today. And, it's sometimes for good, it's sometimes not so good. It's creating pollution, it's poisoning the planet, it's destroying, ecosystems. It's, to our point about ancient, wisdom, it's like we've been killing animals and plants and species that like we've been leveraging to create life-saving medicine, and we're losing, nature's secrets every time another one goes extinct, and so it's like we have such incredible opportunities as creators on this planet to effectively build our dreams and provide a means. There's so much good we can do and by doing well. And so for me, it's like in founders I trust. It's like I've lost, I've gotten jaded by government. I've lost some faith in religions, and so I believe that founders in many ways are a force, a true force, and I'm appalled in many ways that we're not working together. I came into this realization after doing a lot of the inner work and going on the like a lot of work with the tribes and just realizing like, wait, if we have these if founders are going on these heroes journeys and they're getting initiated, and those that are being successful are not finding full fulfillment, and they're craving community and love and joy, and want to be inspired in creating things that will better the world, like why are they not teaming up like we would in sports, create all-star teams backing other founders' dreams and creating kind of a little bit of an Olympics of sorts, and coming together in culture and creating as a collective. And that was actually the largely the inspiration for the creation of what is now SUPERNOVA, the organization that I run as the founder, co-founder and CEO. And the vision there is, what if some of the world's most successfully exited founders combine forces, their wisdom, their knowledge, their resources, their networks, and built together and helped other founders that have visions for how they can, do greater work in the world. Like, what if we supported them so that they're not coming from a place of scarcity and instead are coming from a place of abundance? Like, what would happen? And what we've seen is that when that's done, with real integrity, the results are colossal. And you mentioned Colossal in the intro. I mean, I'm a founding advisor. It's like Colossal on the business side reached decacorn status in 4 years. That's putting them up with OpenAI and like some of the most successful companies in the world today. And it largely happened as a result of people getting behind something that is good, like mission is to end the extinction of animals. Like, let's end extinction. Let's bring back extinct animals, rewild them into the planet and the ecosystem, and create, and really create and heal the world a little. It could use it. Mother Nature could use a little bit of love from us. It's given us so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Barry, this conversation is wonderful, and I love everything that you've been saying. And it's interesting because my last question to you, we've just exactly led into it.
Oh, wow. There we go.
Because the last question was the quantum leadership that ultimately is going to be the Quantum Leadership Institute proposes that the future of leadership is collective.
Yes.
When you have an array of leaders who are in coherence with each other, you magnify their power. And that's what's needed given the complexity of life, of business today. You need that coherence among leaders to solve the bigger problems that we face today. It seems like that's something that is going on in Supernova. But let me just ask you for your last comments around this notion of collective leadership and the power of collective leadership.
One can be a lone wolf. Yeah, I know, because I was one at one time, right? You can, if it's up to me, it's meant to be, it's up to me, and you can do everything yourself, and you can be lonely, and there's lots of startups right now that and many people even in Silicon Valley that say the next unicorn or decacorn will be a solo founder just leveraging AI.
Right.
That breaks my heart, because while that's possible, and it almost certainly will happen, oh, what an awful way to live. What an awful experience. And I'm not so sure that whatever that one person creates is actually going to be good for others, because they're not in relationship with others. So how can it be? And so, just even selfishly, why would one choose to go on a, tireless journey, wandering this beautiful spaceship we call Earth by themselves, completely lonely, disconnected, and in isolation, right? I mean, that used to be the worst form of punishment possible. I just got back from Greece. I was there for a few weeks with family, and like being an outcast, right? That was like it was worse than death, right? It's like we are starving in our souls are, I know for myself, I was for years, like starving for connection, starving for, relatability and relevance. And in the indigenous communities, it is about, community and family. And I mean, there's so much richness that comes from that. And anyone that doesn't understand that, travel to a third world country and start to see for yourself, you could have nothing, and yet you can have everything. And so, and you can have it all too. Yeah. And no different than, you can be a busy bee. But if you're a bee on your own and you're just trying to create honey, good luck. I'm going to invest and back the founders that are working with other bees that are, creating a symphony, doing the dance, showing that other bees where the flowers are, how to make greater honey together. It's like, you look at nature, there's so many examples of how, these species thrive through hive mind type mentalities. We use it for Navy SEAL training. We use it for, there's so many examples of why this is not only, better. I mean, it creates better performance. There's so many benefits. And so, just like nodes on a network for technology, nature is an internet of things. And so, trees talking to one another, fungus underground. I mean, it's all working in an ecosystem. And if you're not and you're disconnected, it's a very different experience, personally, professionally, and I've come to learn the two are intertwined. And so, yeah, Stephen, I think that the quantum intelligence, the collective nature of things is a key to unlock the greater life force of success and well-being. And just as a final point, even if one just kind of self-evaluates or assesses the kind of the wheel of life assessment, if you're familiar with it, and they like look at themselves and they say like, well, how am I doing in terms of my health, my wealth, my relationships, like all these different dynamics. It's like, if you're not at a 10, and most aren't, if we're honest with ourselves, like there's an area where we're over indexing and there's another area where we're under indexing. It's like, you can find someone who you see is thriving in those areas, and they can support you, and you can support perhaps them or someone else in an area where you're over indexing and they're under indexing. And together we can live a life of wholeness, fullness. One could even say holiness. So, yeah.
And it not only will be important for us as individuals, but as society and as the planet as well. And so I appreciate everything that you've said to add to this notion of quantum leadership, Barry. And I think that what we're talking about is really the direction of the evolutionary process, whether we're talking about business or society. And the ironic thing is, this is what people really want and need, but they get stuck too much in the stress of survival to, as we have been talking about, be open to new ideas, be vulnerable to making mistakes and doing and getting it right. So I appreciate everything that you've said to add to the conversation, Barry. And I look forward to how we might work together to make this happen in the future. So thank you so much for joining me.
No, my pleasure, Stephen. Thank you so much for creating this, and it's been a pleasure. The questions were really, really, really delightful, and I appreciate the opportunity to have the talk with you today. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me on this Quantum Leadership podcast. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to think bigger, lead more authentically, and take steps toward meaningful change. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with others and make sure you subscribe and go to my website, drstephensideroff.com. Thank you again.